Good Wednesday morning. I'm Brendan Kinney with UpNorthLive News. Thanks for joining us here in the UpNorthLive Digital Studio. This is our fourth installment, now that I think about it, with this being April with our friends at Northern Lakes Community Mental Health. We're going to have these ladies introduce themselves and get into today's topic regarding autism. So, Janelle, if we can learn more about you, what's your title and what do you do with your organization?
Good morning. I'm Janelle Briggs, and I am the Children's IDD Operation Manager. I've been with Northern Lakes for about 7 years, and I've been in the field for about 20.
All right. And Cindy, good morning to you. Thanks for joining us.
Good morning. My name's Cindy O'Connell. I'm a clinical therapist with Northern Lakes. I've been with Northern Lakes just over 5 years and in the field probably about 8 years.
All right. And then whoever wants to start answering questions, this is just a real open conversation. So if Cindy says something and Janelle wants to piggyback off of it, you go for it. Our conversations have been very fluid in the past, and so, but we have two brand new people to our digital studio, so appreciate your time this morning. So first of all, want to know, what is autism? We know we call it a spectrum disorder. So what exactly does that mean? Who wants to start with some of those questions?
I will.
Okay.
So, autism is a developmental disability, and it's a broad range of a condition that identifies some challenges like social skills, repetitive behaviors, speech, and nonverbal communication. The reason why it's identified as a spectrum is because of that wide range. A child or an adult can meet that criteria, but at different levels of functioning. So they may have higher level of skills, but still are struggling from that repetitive behaviors or social skills. But others, really have on the lower end where they're real challenging, like communication, or they're nonverbal. So that's kind of why they have it as a spectrum, because it kind of just an umbrella and covers everything.
And you talked about some of the signs you should watch out for when it comes to autism. How common would you say is autism?
So the Center for Disease Control said in 2020 that 1 out of 36 8-year-olds have autism. It turns out to be about 3.8 times more boys than girls. Boys at about 4.3% and girls at about 1.1%.
Okay. And I'm curious to know, in terms of the steps that somebody takes if their primary care provider wants a child to be evaluated for autism, how does that process work?
Usually if the child's primary care provider has some concerns and would like them to be further evaluated, in most cases, the primary care would send a referral to Northern Lakes, requesting additional testing and evaluating. So that's usually the first step that the provider can do to help the family get connected with services.
Mm-hmm. And now the next part here, well, multiple parts to this question. So we'll start with ABA services. So if a doctor said you should get ABA services for the child, first of all, what is that? We'll start there.
Yeah, ABA stands for Applied Behavioral Analysis. It's a type of therapy that focuses on supporting, helpful behaviors or positive behaviors and reducing those harmful behaviors. It also helps to increase like language skills and communication and social skills. It's meant to help those who are diagnosed with autism and up to the age of 21.
Mm-hmm. So how does this work, and then what are the steps?
So first of all, the family would need to be open to our services if they have Medicaid. And then once that has been established, then they will be assigned a case manager to help link them and coordinate them to services. And once that child has an official medical diagnosis of autism, then the staff or the case manager will then help the family choose an ABA provider in our community. And then once that is connected, that ABA provider will do an assessment to then kind of really fine tune what exactly are the needs for that child and what the focus should be to help build those skills. And then they'll work with the family to reinforce those skills.
And then in terms of an overview of ABA and in terms of what this looks like in the family's daily life, if you can talk about that, that would be great.
Yeah, so that assessment that the ABA provider does, it breaks down exactly what the goals and treatment will look like. On average, the most that a child can receive is 40 hours a week of that direct therapy. In most cases, it's not that high. It's usually about 30, especially for the really young ones, because that's a lot for like a 2 or 3-year-old. So it's an intensive service. So families, have that commitment that they have to make in order for that to be successful. And usually the provider gives one-on-one instructions through a parent training. And that's usually 1 hour a week, but it can be more. And the idea is to reinforce those skills so that way they can kind of step away and the family can kind of take over those skills that they've learned and feel empowered and feel that they can make it, continue to make those progressions for the child.
Appreciate that information, Janelle. Before we go on to another topic, was there anything else you wanted to mention about ABA, either Janelle or Cindy?
Not about ABA, but I was kind of wanting to mention some of the symptoms that families or friends might notice when they're looking at autism.
Yeah, for sure. Take it away, Cindy.
Yeah, so I was kind of thinking of some practical things that families might notice along the social range. They might notice that their child isn't engaging in eye contact, avoiding it, or looking the other way. They might notice that their child's not responding by 9 months when their name's called. They may notice that their child has limited emotions or expressions, or their facial expressions doesn't match what's happening with them. They might notice that their little one doesn't have interest in reciprocal games like peekaboo or patty cake at 12 months old. They might notice that their little one isn't doing gestures like blowing kisses or high five or waving. They might notice that their little one wants to play alone and doesn't really show interest in other people. They might notice that at 4 months they don't engage in imaginary play like firemen or superheroes. They might notice that the little one doesn't try to engage by singing or dancing or those fun playing. For reciprocal or repetitive behaviors, they might notice that their kiddo lines everything up the same way every time and gets upset if it's changed. They might notice that they repeat words or phrases often or play with the same toys the same way every time. Or when they play with the toy, they might notice that they play with the parts and not the toy, like spin car wheels again and again and watch them, or flick the doll's eyes. They might notice that they have to follow routines or have major meltdowns, or they have really strong reactions to sensory items like tags or noises or sounds or tastes. And one that really stands out is they might notice that their child has a unique way of talking. The tone is maybe sing-song or unique or flat or very formal or robotic. It just sounds noticeably different than other kids. Aside from those repetitive interests or communication, they might notice delays in language or movement or cognitive skills. The kiddo might be really hyperactive, impulsive, or inattentive, have high stress or anxiety, have little or no boundaries, or may not even notice their own physical body. Like they might knock into other people or sit on their laps and not even notice that they're doing it, totally unaware. So those are some pretty practical things that you might notice when you're evaluating for or thinking about being evaluated
Mm-hmm.
for your child.
Cindy, we appreciate that information. I'm curious to know if any other illnesses or situations can maybe be confused with autism.
So there's a few of the other areas that kind of mirror symptoms for autism. Genetic disorders like Down syndrome or Fragile X or Willie Prater can share some symptoms. Injuries, car accidents or brain injuries can share symptoms. Malnourishment or toxins can share symptoms. ADHD shares a lot of symptoms. The biggest one that we run across that often gets confused is trauma. Kids who have experienced trauma share a lot of the symptoms, and you can often get confused. So I kind of wanted to talk about that one for a little bit
Sure.
with what we've got. When we think of trauma, we think of the really big traumas like neglect or abuse or sexual abuse. But there's a lot of other traumas that the kids might experience that impact them, such as accidents, loss of a family member, adoption, financial struggles, coming from a war environment or having a big history of medical trauma where they've spent early years in a hospital. Those are some of the things that can be really traumatic, that symptoms overlap of ASD. So I thought maybe I would share some of the symptoms that they both, ASD and trauma, share, and then separate ones that are unique to both.
Yeah.
For ASD and trauma, they both share social problems, withdrawal and communication. For both of them, there's a lack of eye contact at times, or somatic symptoms like headaches, stomach ache, throwing up. The boundaries are shared, a lack of boundaries or a lack of fear. Repetitive behaviors or sleep problems are shared. It's hard for both of them for school at times. Both of them can have a really flat expression or struggle with sensory issues or concerns or be really emotional reactive. Those are some of the main ones that they share. Trauma ones stand out a little bit because they might, where ASD usually shows up by the time a child's 2, trauma can show up anytime. So one of the things would be if you notice a change in behaviors that wasn't before, that could be a big one. If there's a history of trauma, if a child has reoccurring nightmares that are keeping them awake, or if you come across a child and they hypervigilant, they kind of move away from you or shake, that is a big warning sign. If they go into that fight, flight, or freeze mode, where something happens and their body gears up and they're ready to take on the world, or they run, or they just freeze up like a deer, those are kind of some warning signs. Or if they have feelings of shame or guilt, those can be a big sign. And of course, the physical signs like bruises, burns, cuts, those are very indicative. Or if they tell you, that can be pretty clear. The signs that are really unique to ASD are social deficits that are very across all domains, that they really struggle, especially reciprocal, that back and forth piece. they have a real hard time recognizing social cues, both verbal and nonverbal. But the two ones that stand out to me personally are that difference in language, the way of speaking or not speaking at all, that kind of musical voice, robotic, um, echolea where they repeat things, can be very formal even though they're very young. And those repetitive movements that are pretty characteristic of ASD, the flapping or the rocking, the spinning, tapping, those ones are pretty unique to ASD. The reason that we feel strongly, or I feel strongly, that it's important to notice if there's trauma is because those behaviors we see, those are a coping mechanism for the child. That's how they've learned to survive the trauma. And we want to help them not need those behaviors anymore. We want to help them feel safe and secure so they don't need those maladaptive ways. And then ABA can work better with the kids that do have trauma and ASD.
Is there anything else, Janelle, that you wanted to say to piggyback off of that?
No, she did a wonderful job. Yeah, no, I think it is a good point to tell families that, if their child does have or has experienced some level of trauma, ABA is going to focus on the maladaptive behaviors and focus on things of helping the language and the social. But if we don't focus on the root of why those behaviors have been occurring or why there's such a resistance to, being social or engaging, then it's not going to be as helpful for the child or the family. So a lot of times we provide both services. So if a child has identified as having some trauma or some significant emotional troubles with regulating, then we would open them to outpatient therapy along with ABA to kind of come at it from both angles to provide the best supportive treatment as possible.
And if somebody watching on our social media platforms is not aware of Northern Lakes Community Mental Health, if either one of you can explain what's all happening with the organization, what services are provided, and what people should know.
Yeah, so for IDD Children's Services, we cover all 6 counties that we serve, which is Grand Traverse, Leelanau County, Wexford County, Missaukee County, and Crawford and Roscommon counties. So, and I supervise all those areas. So as far as services, our primary service that we offer is for children who are diagnosed with autism. We do provide the testing and evaluation, and these are for Medicaid recipients. Once they, have identified that there's a need and they are open to our services, we can offer ABA. If they have autism, we can provide outpatient therapy if needed. We do try to work with the family to find respite and sometimes community living support, CLS. I think the big struggle right now is just having those, having people in the community being able to provide that service. A lot of times families utilize a friend or a neighbor or a close acquaintance to be able to give them some relief. So we have a process that we can provide that. We also do psych services for psychiatry if that's something that's appropriate. We also work with the school too. It's a huge partnership that we want to work with a child, especially a child that has any type of developmental delay, that we provide that ongoing communication with the school. We support the family during that, and just being present and having that kind of wrapped around support around the family. Sometimes families just struggle with connecting and knowing what's out there. So that's why a case manager would kind of link and coordinate them to services that would best support them.
And the counties that Janelle mentioned are in northern Michigan. We know we have people watching all over the place, on our digital platforms, our social media platforms. if people have questions, how can they reach either you, Janelle, or you, Cindy?
Yeah, I mean, they can call our main number at in Traverse City. That's where I'm mostly based out of. We also, we have an access number for anyone who wants to call and request services. If they have Medicaid, and even if they have commercial insurance as well, they can certainly call and have a screen to determine if they're eligible for services. And then once that occurs, then they will have a full clinical assessment done to really identify what their needs are. A lot of times families struggle to even identify what they need. They know there's something that they need help with. They just don't necessarily know how to articulate what that is. That therapist or that clinical assessment will help identify what those needs are. So the family can kind of work together. And then once that occurs, then they kind of coordinate to which program within our agency would be best fit and the best support for them based on their needs.
And Cindy, is there anything else you want, or Janelle, anything else you want families to know about the services with Northern Lakes?
We do have families that we serve and kids that we serve that are not on the spectrum and still have IDD. They don't generally qualify for ABA, but we do offer support and therapy to help support the families and their needs, such as coming up with parenting strategies or strategies to work within the home, or attending school IEPs like Janelle was saying. Just across the board, whatever we can do to help is really what we try to do.
Yeah, no, that's a good point to make. That, yeah, our children that we work with aren't just on the spectrum. A lot of them have developmental delays, both the physical and intellectual, that families just need someone to kind of hold their hand and walk with them and help them understand what's out there in the community, what the school can be, a support and offer. I also want to mention that if a family has a child that is receiving IEP supports, they don't necessarily have to be open to our program or our agency to have us be there as a support. They simply just let the school coordinator know that they would like community partners such as Northern Lakes Community Mental Health to be present for that IEP, just to support the family, answer any questions they may have, especially if they're going through any transition. That can be an additional support to help the family know what's out there and know what the next steps are as their child starts to age into adulthood.
All right. Is there anything else that we didn't cover that either one of you want to talk about right now?
I can't think of anything.
No, and the only thing I would add is that if families just have questions or they just want to be pointed in the right direction, you can always feel free to call and they can ask for me directly. I'd be more than happy to help navigate that for a family that, even if they don't have Medicaid, they just need to understand what's out there and how to, what the steps would be. I'm open to having those conversations for families. And our community partners too. If anyone, had questions, I talk frequently to the schools and to primary care providers in our community. So I think it's really important that we all work together and kind of support not only our community, but our families. I think that's really what we're about.
Mm-hmm. And is there a website, phone number, email address, the best way that families can get a hold of you?
Yeah, I have a direct email address and I have a direct number, and then we have our access line that families can call to request, to be evaluated or to look into services for themselves.
Mm-hmm. Is that something they can find out on the website, or what's the best way to get that information?
Yes, the number for services, our access number in our direct line is available on our website. Also, a lot of information is on our Facebook page as well. But anyone that calls our agency, they can simply ask for the Children's IDD program or Children's IDD supervisor, and that call will be directed to me. And then I can simply return their call, answer their questions, and help guide them.
All right. Janelle and Cindy, thanks for your time today. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And appreciate you joining us for this April edition of Your Mental Health Connection. And we'll see you next month. Thanks for your time.
Thank you.